Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Coco Bandicoot here, and I am back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos once again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Klonoa Phantasy Reverie series, while we're still playing through Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil, for the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X/S, PC Steam, and of course the Nintendo Switch. So last time we've essentially manage to able to experiencing the majority of the forms of the folk segment, which appears to be by the forms of not only folk hall, but able to actually discover by the forms of the Bell of Discord. And in addition to that, we also manage to able to take care of the forms of 3 levels. In addition to that, another boss. So as a result, we did those pretty nicely, all things considered, but on the upside is though is that I fully appreciate about the fact that at least we don't die too many times this time around, unlike the original PlayStation 2 version, where, you know, about the fact that with the most annoying piece to obtain, you know, in the forms of the actual level called Volcanium Inferno, at least as far as I'm aware. But at least I fully appreciate about the forms of, like I said before, not too many deaths or anything else like that, at the very least. So, anyway, today for this video is about the fact that, well, despite the fact that, on the other hand, though, that we, unfortunately, though, did not able to actually receive the third element, mainly because Lorana did somehow beat us to it. So because of that though, hopefully we should able to actually go after the next element instead. So speaking of which, is that today for this video is about the fact that we're going to be go ahead and explore into the next level, which appears to be Ishras Ark, I think is what it says anyway. So yeah, as a result for that particular matter what though, is about the fact that I'm pretty sure we're now onto the halfway point. In terms of the forms of Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil portion of the forms of Klonoa Phantasy Reverie series up to this point. So, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that I can't even believe the actual progression is actually going to get a lot more quicker than I was expecting, mainly because, as I mentioned this before, with the lack of loading times in journey forms of depending on what version of the game you're playing, so as a result the loading times are much more faster this time around, as you probably already expect. So as a result, for this particular stage right here, alongside with the forms of another one coming up in the future, that obviously those kinds of levels are going to be super duper lengthy, mainly because in order to actually succeed this stage, is that we need to activate all of these terminals, so just in case we can able to activate the actual Ark itself. So because of that though, yeah, everything else will become to expect basically. So anyways, a few things I want to explain for this point today is about the fact that, well, today's date of course is the 21st of March today, in some cases in 2024 today. So naturally speaking though, is about the fact that we've only got about 1 more week left until Kung Fu Panda 4 is going to be releasing on the cinemas in the UK version. Now, speaking of the forms of Kung Fu Panda 4, for I've realized about something. Apparently though, in Rotten Tomatoes website at this point in time, that the actual review scores when it comes to critics scores, it did somehow became much more lower than the forms of how it does it in during the forms of it not only the first film, but also the second film and the third film respectively, which I'm not exactly sure why that seems to be the case. My guess is about the fact that it might be something a little bit too similar to the forms of how it does it for Toy Story 4 situation, about the fact that obviously, if you couldn't tell, during the forms of in Toy Story 4, that's obviously no matter what though, despite the fact that that film is almost going to be 5 years old until when it gets to at some point in during the forms of in June. And relatively speaking, I was about the fact that in that film of Toy Story 4, that the majority of some other characters have been sidelined for the majority of that film, which appears to be Jessie, Mr. Potato Head, Rex, and etc. So the majority of the focus of Toy Story 4 is not only for Woody, but also for Forky as well, and maybe occasional Buzz, despite the fact that he's acting a little bit more dumber than the forms of how it does it in the previous 3 films, which I could assure to you because of the forms of this very questionable choices when it comes to likely the inner voice kind of plot details. So because of that though, I get the strong feeling about the forms of Kung Fu Panda 4 is actually going to get the exactly similar treatment, except the fact that they obviously going to be sidelined the majority of the Furious 5, which appears to be Tyrus, and as well as the forms of Monkey, and Mantis, and also same applies with the forms of... I don't know what the other two characters they are exactly, because I know for a fact it's been a very long while since I actually have last seen certain Kung Fu Panda movies, although I'm still curious to check it out though still, but my expectations might be a little bit lower this time around, although I'm still pretty much hyped for it though, to able to see some awesome martial arts combat is usually going to be involved again, but except the fact that it's actually much more lesser compared to the forms of how it does on the previous 3 films. I can assure to you, because of how the fact I will say that Kung Fu Panda 3 is the greatest way to end things off with the entire trilogy of the Kung Fu Panda series, which as a result that could be also applied to the forms of How to Train Your Dragon, and on top of that, Toy Story film franchise. Well, despite the fact that we're going to be getting some more sequels eventually, ranging from Toy Story 5 and all that stuff, which honestly, because of how the fact that I'm guessing the reason why that the sequels is going to be happening for the sake of the forms of the majority of some film franchises nowadays, is most notably because they want to get some bit of money back. After what I've noticed is about the fact that recently Disney is struggling when it comes to the forms of the box office performance during the recent times recently after the events of the actual pandemic era, because obviously the reason why that certain Disney films has received some box office bombs recently, clearly because of the forms of the pandemic situation. So because of that though, it's awfully sad though, mainly because back in the day that Disney was obviously super iconic, but every now and then it's about the fact that with all this countless amount of sequels they're going to be announcing, and on top of that, countless amount of live action movies is in development, which I wasn't too pleased about. And in addition to that though, is about the fact that, well, when it comes to like original kind of film types, they're alright for the most part. Well, I would say the only highlight I can probably think about is the forms of Encanto, just because Encanto was actually interesting, despite the fact that unfortunately though, I no longer received that film, mainly because I'm not a big fan of the forms of the questionable change when it comes to likely for the sake of the forms of the standard DVD cases, I will admit though right away, because as far as I'm aware, they are a little bit too flimsy for my taste, but still. So anyways, in order to be able to actually activate one of those generators, as you can see, is that we have to utilize with that yellow enemy thingy right there, and then basically the more you're trying to build up with that specific chain combo, basically we can able to hold up with that particular projectile to become, at first glance it'll be yellow, and eventually blue, and eventually until red. So yeah, you probably get the idea of how this go works out to be. Now I'm pretty sure that particular concept was technically brought back from the likes of, let's just say, Klonoa 2 Dream Champ Tournament or something. Well, mind you, about the fact that it's been about roughly 2 years ago actually since we've last played Klonoa 2 Dream Champ Tournament for the Game Boy Advance. Well, mind you, because of how the fact that, like I stated this before, that we've almost completed every single Klonoa games up to this point for the majority of the forms of our YouTube channel, with only 2 exceptions, mind you, which is of course Klonoa Beach Volleyball, just because, for what I've heard anyway, that game is ridiculously expensive if you really want to go after a complete in-boxed copy of the game, ranging from its manual alongside with the disc as well. And on top of all that stuff though, is about the fact I did double check on eBay, and holy macaroni, it is way too pricey at the moment. So because of that though, I might have to wait for a very long time if I get a chance to able to actually get that game. Although I do know for the fact that it might not be that perfect, but regardless of everything else though, it's just a beach volleyball kind of sports type of gameplay, and I'm a little bit more curious to able to know of how that game actually plays out to be. And as far as I'm aware, that when it comes to the forms of Klonoa Heroes, I still need to able to try to figure out the forms of the English translation patch, so that way I can able to understand what the forms of the menu navigations or anything else like that. So because of that though, I will try my best if I decide able to make this work, but I don't think it's possible we can able to do Klonoa Heroes, the Legendary Star Medal for this year in particular, for 2024, just because no matter what though, it's about the fact that until tomorrow, after this video releases, as far as I'm aware, is that Princess Peach Showtime is going to be releasing tomorrow for the Nintendo Switch. And as far as I'm usually can tell, right from the start though, is that I've noticed about the fact that, well, despite the fact I haven't exactly looked upon that much reviews, or in some cases haven't exactly looked upon too much gameplay footage that much, just because, like the forms of how it does in Super Mario Bros. Wonder, including WarioWare Move It, I'm basically gonna have to able to ignore spoilers for the time being, except with the forms of some remakes, just because they played pretty similar to the forms of how it does in the original counterparts, except the fact that with the actual, like, you know, different graphics, and on top of that, some quality of life improvements. Well, I've noticed that anyway, so... But I digress. So, as a result, no matter what though, is about the fact that, unfortunately though, for those of you who really desperately want able to unlock not only Red, but also Chuck as well, through the forms of, maybe the forms of not only Sonic Dash, but also with Sonic Forces Speed Battle, and same plus with the forms of maybe Angry Birds 2, and even Angry Birds, Dream Party, or anything else like that, or Dream Blast, for its puzzle game, and finally, most notably, Angry Birds and Friends, or Angry Birds Friends, I should say. I know for a fact it's been quite some time since I actually mentioned something like this, mainly because no matter what though, is about the fact at this point in time, that we've almost nearly at the end of March before we move on to April, so, man, time flies, you know, and, relatively speaking, though, is about the fact that this today is going to be the final chance that you can able to actually try to unlock not only Red, but for Chuck as well, because if you don't make it in the nick of time, obviously, though, the actual event is going to discontinue. So because of that, though, still we are very lucky that we somehow managed to unlock the other two characters in Sonic Dash, basically, because I just like to able to relax for a bit when it comes to able to be experiencing, you know, Sonic Dash in general. So because of that though, yeah, that's what I can really say about that, I guess. So anyway, speaking of which though, is about the fact that I've noticed something right from the start as well, that Marvel Studios is reportedly trying to take less risks and focusing on more guaranteed hits. Such as, for instance, there was actually 2 movies it's probably not gonna happen, which there are Captain Marvel 3 and Ant-Man 4, and suffice to say, both of those movies are not gonna happen, mainly because they both receive, well, when it comes to the forms of not only Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, as well as the forms of the Marvels, both of those films have suffered the forms of some very disappointing box office performance, which as a result, yeah, I can see why that those, another 2 movie sequels is probably not gonna happen, mainly because of the box office situation. So because of that though, yeah, that's a little bit, understatement, especially noticeable because I will admit it though right away that I feel like The Marvels is okay, but it's not the best film I've ever seen. Now, as far as I'm aware, with Ant-Man and the Wasp, oh my god, with the Quantumania film, it's just pretty bad. Especially noticeable because I will admit though right away, I just do not like that film anymore after when the, you know, it's been like a year ago since that particular film first came out, during the films of in 2023. Like, I was assuming that was okay, but while looking back in it now though, I just felt a little bit disappointed with that film, I must be honest here, especially because no matter what though, that, I just have no idea how do I explain any of these things, so, but I digress. So, oh, and also another thing I would like to mention about this as well, we've actually got ourselves some more posters for the likes of Inside Out 2. So, for instance, they've shown us the forms of some bunch of posters from the likes of the usual 5 emotions, ranging from joy, anger, sadness, alongside with fear and disgust, as we probably established that before. And in addition to that, they also mentioned about the forms of some new emotions as well. Now, I will say, I like the new render of Joy right now, mainly because it looks brand new at the time. So, still, I'm very excited to see Inside Out 2, especially noticeable because, relatively speaking, though, is about the fact that I will admit though right away, Inside Out is without doubt one of the most creative Pixar movies I've ever seen, and it really deserves a sequel after all, despite that I'm really hoping that the writing is going to be quite good, I guess. Well, don't get our hopes up just yet though, mainly because no matter what though, my guess is about the fact that, well, even though it's a bit difficult to say this right about now, mainly because I will have to admit it the right way, is about the fact that we'll just see what happens, and during at some points, once that particular film decides to release. Now, as far as I'm aware, am I able to actually give the Garfield movie a bit of a chance? Because I don't know about you, because I'm also able to actually be curious to able to check that film out, because obviously Garfield is going to be voiced by Chris Pratt, you know, the guy who did Mario from the likes of, you know, the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and that also applies to the forms of Star-Lord as well, from the likes of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, as far as I'm aware. So, anyways, let's go ahead and blast ourselves all the way to the other side. So, just to ensure we can able to actually activate the, let's just say, the last generator of any sort. So, just to ensure that once we do manage to activate all of those generators, then I'm pretty sure the level will be done for good. So, at least if I was assuming so anyway. Well, that again though is about the fact that it's been about 2 days ago since I've last played this game for sure. Although, I will admit though right away, it's about the fact that I seem to suddenly realize about the fact that we've only just got about, well, let's just say that we've only got about 11 days to go until not only April is about to start, but it's also about the fact that with April Fool's Day as well. Because gee, no matter what though, we've only got about 10 more days to go until Easter Sunday is going to take place. So because of that, also as far as I've realized about the fact that the actual the clock time is actually going to go forward for the sake of the forms of the spring clock. So because of that though, that's also going to be happening by the end of March, specifically March 31st. So yeah, that seems kind of interesting to say the least. So, but either way, also, I would like to point things out as well is about the fact that, yes, apparently though, is about the fact that, what I've noticed something is about the fact that when it comes to the forms of, another thing I would like to discuss upon is that, exponentially speaking though, is that I've noticed about the fact that, recently, Tetris 99 has received yet another update, and this time what appears to be by the forms of version 2.4.0. So, I'm not exactly sure how do I describe about any of those things, I have to be honest here. Mind you about the fact I haven't exactly looked upon too much of gameplay footage for the likes of Tetris 99 for some time. Clearly because no matter what though, I still haven't exactly got the game physically after all. Clearly because I'm not exactly a huge Tetris master, I must be honest here. Clearly because I sadly no longer have Tetris DS anymore for the DS, although I'm really hoping about the fact that until at some point in the future, I can possibly try to able to actually go after the next couple of Nintendo DS games to able to complete my entire DS game collection. Well, mind you, I'm probably not going to get all of them, mind you, because some of them are actually, like, not really invested that much, and on top of that, some other games are pretty darn expensive. Usually, for example, with the Castlevania DS games, ranging from Portrait of Ruin, and on top of that, there's also another Castlevania game is also extremely expensive as well, if you're trying to able to actually buy the game with a complete box copy of the game. So, relatively speaking, I was about the fact I don't think it's possible we can able to get, you know, the majority of the Castlevania games on the DS, sadly. Although, I was really expecting about the fact that maybe they'll bring in maybe the last Castlevania compilation game before, well, potentially speaking of, if they move on to the next Nintendo system. Like, for example, they're also able to focus on, the Castlevania DS games, including some honorable mentions ranging from, let's just say, Castlevania Chronicles for the PlayStation 1, or anything else like that. It's a bit difficult to tell for the sake of time, mainly because at this point in time, that for the majority of the forms of the last batch of the forms of the, Nintendo Switch gaming announcements, it's going to be most likely focusing on, smaller titles as a result, ranging from remasters or ports or remakes, and especially noticeable occasional spin-off game with some new additions or some new gameplay mechanics or anything else like that. Well, then again, it's a bit difficult to tell at this point. I mean, after all, the actual first half of the year for 2024 is actually going to get really strong as far as I'm usually concerned, just because, about the fact no matter what though, I think, relatively speaking though, we've only just got about 63 days to go until Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door is going to be releasing on the Nintendo Switch, and as far as I'm aware is about the fact that I'm still pretty excited for it. I'm not exactly sure which specific website I can probably pre-order it from. Well, we shall see what happens though, especially noticeable because I'm still curious to know if the pre-order bonus items will decide to able to get revealed for one of those specific websites in mind. So either way, so yeah, there we go. That pretty much takes care of the forms of this level right here. So it is overall very lengthy. It only took me roughly about 19 minutes to complete. So anyway, so now let's move on to the next level, which appears to be Mountains of Mira-Mira. I think it's what it says anyway. And as far as I'm aware, similar to the forms of how it does it in Jungle Slider level, we're about to be going on to yet another hoverboard stage. So that'll be pretty fun. Although, I highly doubt about the fact that I don't think it's possible for me to able to go after every single crystals or jewels to be more specifically, but I will try my best if I would decide able to go for a bit of a good run as far as I'm usually concerned with that stuff. And suffice to say, yeah, we got the exact same hoverboard as the new forms of Jungle Slider. So yeah, Klonoa just seems to get a little bit confused at first because obviously he thinks about the fact that we basically stole the hoverboard thanks to the forms of, you know, poker as far as I'm usually concerned with. But hey, at least we don't mind probably stealing it or somewhat. Well, I have no idea. It's probably like thief kind of syndrome or something. I have no idea. So, I will admit though, I apologize about the fact that my commentary is a little bit slightly off at some form or another, but that's just mainly because no matter what though, I'm still curious to know of what's expecting to come in regards to the forms of not only by the conclusion of March, but it's also with the forms of potential April for its future potentials to come. Well, you know what I'm saying. Also, this music is really cool though, especially noticeable, despite the fact that it was actually spoken as in the Gerberish kind of lyrics to it though, although as far as I'm usually concerned about the fact that, dang it, I misjudged my jump, but that's okay though, because we've already got that piece anyway, so, and exponentially we don't have to worry about re-grabbing it again, so I fully appreciate about that still. So, anywho, and the next thing I want to point out, potentially speaking of, is that I've noticed something about the fact that not only does, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania did receive some very disappointing box office performance, that was also applied for Marvels as well, but exponentially also, that could be also applied for the, Eternals, because my god, Eternals is a snorefest to me, just because no matter what though, if I see that film for one last time on the forms of on Disney Plus, I just simply somehow snore through everything for that particular film, because obviously that film blows in my opinion. And that's the reason why that the sequel is not gonna happen, mainly because I just got incredibly bored of it though. Well, that might be besides the point, because I'm usually biased when it comes to preferring some like action-packed films and all that stuff though, which that's the reason why we are extremely hyped about the films of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 still, and as far as I'm aware, we've only got about exactly 9 months left now until Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the movie, is going to be on the horizon. So yeah, we are still very curious about the fact that how that film's going to play out to be, and especially noticeable about the fact that a lot of people are speculating about the forms of what the age rating board is going to be like for the likes of Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the movie. Now, as far as I'm usually concerned correctly, it will basically still bring in PG-rated movie, just like the forms of how it does it on not only the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie, but also with the forms of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 movie as well. And exponentially though, that could be also applied with Pokemon Detective Pikachu, and on top of that, the Super Mario Bros. Movie, except the fact that in the Super Mario Bros. Movie, it's fully animated, rather than the forms of taking place in live action stuff, unlike in Sonic the Hedgehog movies, including with Detective Pikachu. Oh, as far as I'm aware, that when it gets to the point that during the films have been made this year, that will mark the 5th year anniversary of the film's release of the films of Detective Pikachu movie. So, that's actually pretty swell though, although despite the fact it's been a very long time since I actually have last seen that film, mainly because no matter what though, it's about the fact that I'm still basically hyped about the films of, you know, some other films to be coming for the likes of not only for this year, but also with the films of potentially for next year as well. Likely, for instance, about the fact I've noticed about the fact that the next film coming up in 2025 is not only the next Mission Impossible movie, but also with the films of potentially, speaking now, the final Fast and Furious movie, which appears to be Fast 11. And the reason why I pointed out is because ever since in February, basically though, Vin Diesel has been confirmed about the fact that Fast 11 is going to be considered to be the final installment of the Fast and Furious movies. As far as I'm aware, yeah, you know, you get the idea for this point, especially noticeable because at this point in time, I just have no idea that Fast and Furious, as the actual film franchise itself, actually got a bunch of sequels. I mean, what is this, like a Mega Man syndrome? Because obviously, no matter what though, when it comes to specifically the classic Mega Man games, obviously no matter what though, oh, we're actually going to be going down this little slide with the Christmas tree, even though despite the fact that we're not exactly at, well, Christmas just yet though. But regardless of such though, the lighting effects on here looks super stunning, especially noticeable because, well, obviously I'm fully appreciate about the forms of how the fact that at least we're getting ourselves a, you know, the HD version of Klonoa 2 after all, within modern platforms, which still we fully appreciate about it, especially noticeable because, well, I'm just, you know, super duper happy to able to see Klonoa 2 returning after the events of how the fact that, well, at least technically about the fact that if you ever experienced the, well, I don't know about you, because it has been quite some time since I actually discussed upon things, but either way, and suffice to say, we finished the level like so. And quite frankly though, this level doesn't take me that long though, which I fully understand for that particular length as far as I'm aware. So, anywho though, also, another thing I want to mention about this as well is that, yes, I've already mentioned about this before, is that, yes, indeed, that, the 11th film would be the final installment after all. So, I'm still curious to know of what's gonna happen until specifically in 2025. So, but that can be a very long time at this point. And I'm pretty sure it's gonna be like, 1 year and 1 month at this point right now. So, even then though, time will tell, especially noticeable we're not exactly at 2025 just yet. So, anyway, as I was saying about the films of some of those Nintendo DS games, I'm curious to able to try to pick it up at some point, which there are. Yoshi Touch and Go, just because obviously Yoshi is a pretty cool character, and I'm curious to know about the fact that hopefully I should probably get that game at some point, because obviously that was the only Yoshi game I haven't exactly got just yet when it comes to releasing on the Nintendo DS at one point. So, anyways, let's move on to, presumably speaking though, we'll do one more level for the time being, and that's what appears to be Maze of Memories. And as far as I'm aware, similar to the forms of how it does it on the Ark level, I can assure you this level is also going to be extremely lengthy, all because of one thing, mainly because of the forms of backtracking, and on top of that, we have to navigate through a multitude of rooms. So, but I'm really hoping about the fact that we'll try to beat the entire stage as quickly as possible. So, yeah, again, I apologize for my commentary. It's a little bit slightly messy at some point, like I said this before. But that's just mainly because at this point in time, that we got to wait for a certain amount of time until we're able to mention something new at this point. And presumably speaking, I was about the fact I've noticed that recently, yesterday, that Maxi, he somehow finished up with the forms of Silver Story during the forms of in Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. So, and I can assure you about the fact that he's now moved on to the last story from the likes of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, and exponentially though, hopefully he should be able to finish the entire story mode for the likes of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 before he decides to move on to some extra content, specifically DLC and much more. So, but then again, we'll have to discuss more about it if we get onto that specific point. So, anywho though, yeah, and there's also another thing I want to classify for mentioning about this as well, I guess, is about the fact that, well, as far as I'm aware, I believe that Maxi has already mentioned about this earlier, it appears to be about the fact that recently Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the movie, has recently finished up filming, so as a result, all they need to work on is right now is not only to try to able to put up with the forms of a lot of CG animations needs to do, but it's also with the forms of post-productioning as well phase, for the likes of not only for its voice acting, but it's also with the forms of a lot of editing stuff as well. So, and I'm pretty sure no matter what though, we might classify for saying this right now, that we might able to actually get ourselves a trailer for Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the movie, during at some point during sometime in August. I'm pretty sure that's where it's at, mainly because no matter what though, it might actually do the exact same situation as the forms of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the movie at the very least, because after all, back in during the forms of sometime in 2021, that basically though, they've shown us the actual title announcement for Sonic the Hedgehog 2 movie, and eventually once we get the forms of the Game Awards in 2021 in December, then obviously we get ourselves the actual official trailer for Sonic the Hedgehog 2 movie, and then until likely for 4 months later, then the film finally came out. And that was also the actual exactly similar treatment as the films of recently for Sonic the Hedgehog 3 movie, although it's about the fact that obviously we've already seen the actual title of the film of the actual Sonic the Hedgehog 3 movie logo already ever since in about a month ago, since in February in this year. So exponentially speaking though, we might able to actually see a first ever trailer for Sonic the Hedgehog 3 the movie at some point in during the films of in August, just about 4 months before the movie is going to be releasing. So because of that though, yeah, let's just hope that'll make it happen though. Especially noticeable that I'm really still hoping about the fact that that film will not get delayed, all because of one thing, because of the films of that, Mufasa the Lion King live action movie is going to be on the exact same time as well. So, oh jeez, I honestly have no idea how do I explain any of these things at this point, because still, no matter what though, like we've already established that before, that I'm basically simply done with the films those live action Disney movies now, because not only because they are pretty stale, but it's also about the fact that it just feels a bit underwhelming, like usually for the sake of time, just because no matter what though, it's about the fact that yes, well, I've heard anyway, that the live action version of Lilo and Stitch is going to be happening on Disney Plus at some point, and let me tell you, I'm not really looking forward to that, mainly because to me, the original is pure classic, because I'm going to say this right now, I can still able to actually rewatch the original film any day, just because it is super interesting with the actual dynamic between not only Lilo, but also for Stitch as well, but that's just for my taste anyway, so okay, so something tells me we need to able to grab that specific enemy to able to get all the way up there, not just by getting the next doll piece, but also just trying to able to obtain some more crystals in the process for this point right here. So, anyway, let's just do this anyway. And, also another thing I want to mention about this as well is that, I've noticed something already about the fact that until when it gets to point, until, sometime in July, that Dragon Ball Revenge of King Piccolo is going to be 15 years old during that time in that specific period. So, but at least we can able to save that particular topic for later if we get onto at some point in July. So, oh, and another thing I want to mention about this, yeah, sorry for the fact that it's like better late than never, I suppose, when it comes to mentioning this. We did discover the forms of some of the most unfortunate news that's been happened since, technically speaking, since 20 days ago. Likely, for instance, is about the fact that one of the Dragon Ball creator called, Akari Torimori, I think is what it says anyway. Again, I mispronounced that name, so I do apologize for that point, folks. But, yeah, unfortunately though, he died from the sake of the forms of he was 68 years old, and that happened since the beginning of March, what I've heard anyway, which is, you know, really sad, because as far as I'm aware, yeah, I will admit though, I'm usually a big fan of the Dragon Ball Z series, or even a Dragon Ball series as of today, which is especially noticeable because no matter what though, that Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is finally happening, well, to be more specifically, for the next generation of systems, ranging from, you know, PlayStation 5, alongside with Xbox Series X, and Series S, and even PC as well. And let's just hope about the fact that that game will get revealed during the forms of one of those brand new Nintendo systems. Although I don't think it's possible for the regular Nintendo Switch or anything else like that, because obviously it runs in the Unreal Engine 5, which is understandably because obviously with the graphics and everything, alongside with the actual performance as well. But then again, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Especially noticeable that, imagine if it's going to be coming onto, let's just say on Nintendo Switch 2 or something like that, then I'm seriously going to be hyped for it. But if not, then obviously I have to wait even longer until, obviously, if I decide to go after the PlayStation 5 at some point in the future. Well, it might not be 100% guaranteed just yet though, just because we are still begging to be waiting for Kingdom Hearts 4 to be coming out, for not only for PlayStation 5, but also with Xbox Series X/S, although I was pretty much expecting for to be coming on the PlayStation 5, just because of the graphics and everything, so... Now, as far as I'm aware, Maze of Memories is a bit confusing at first with this part right here, if only because we have to memorize of what we're supposed to do at this point, and every time whenever you go for those little doors right there, you can able to actually go and shift between, you know, with the gravity and stuff like that, which that was actually kind of a cool concept for a level, but even then though, again, it's been quite some time since I actually have last experienced this stage, since on the original PlayStation 2 version. So, and also not to mention though, is about the fact that I've noticed this already, about the fact that I'm pretty concerned about the fact that what recently happens was though, about the forms of, you know what I'm saying, with the forms of Akari Torimori, did recently died. It's most notably because the forms are something to do with the actual bleeding brain, and I was like, oh god, that's just awful. And yeah, it is pretty sad though. And yes, they did somehow point things out for the actual specific announcement message, all thanks to the forms of the Dragon Ball official X page or anything else like that, or the Twitter page or something like that. It did state this: "Dear friends and partners, we are deeply saddened to inform that the manga creator Akari Torimori passed away on March 1st due to, well, something to do with the actual bleeding brain and stuff like that, which is, you know, pretty sad. And he was, you know, 68 years old, and I was like, oh my god. I'm truly sorry for this point, especially noticeable because it is so sudden, and because of that though, it is so shocking at the same time as well. I mean, again, I've got nothing else to really say about that. It's pretty sad, you know? So, anyway, speaking of something worth noting for is about the fact that until at some point, in Journey Forms of Event also in 2025, one of those games in particular is going to be revealed, and it's going to be coming out at some point in next year in 2025. Now, as it turns out, it's going to be a next installment of the Forms of the Fatal Fury series. And what game in questioning is that? Well, it appears to be by the Forms of Fatal Fury, City of the Wolves. So, yeah, that seems kind of interesting, to say the least. So, and I'm not exactly sure if it's going to be multiple platforms to be released on. Well, it's a bit tricky to say this right from the start though, especially noticeable because at this point in time, we simply have no idea when the actual release date is going to be releasing on. I know it's going to be at some point in 2025, but in terms of what systems they're going to be releasing on, my guess it will probably have to be by the forms of the next generation of consoles, ranging from, you know, PlayStation 5, and maybe Nintendo Switch 2, or Xbox Series X, for that matter, just because no matter what though, like we've already established that before, that, when it comes to likely for its development types for the sake of the forms of not only for Nintendo games, but also with the forms of anything else as well. That exponentially speaking though is about the fact that they are going to be working super duper hard in regards of the forms of trying to make specific games made for the sake of the forms of new systems, whilst like I said before, that for the majority of the forms of 2024, for, you know, the majority of the Nintendo Switch games, I'm pretty sure that they're going to be focusing on not only small titles, but also with the forms of tons of remasters or ports or remakes for certain classic games, as far as I'm concerned, and you know, much more. So, but I digress. So, oh, and another thing I want to mention is about the fact that, speaking of Disney though, is that I've noticed something already, that Disney's Wish is going to be coming onto Disney Plus at some point on the 3rd of April. So that's going to be on Wednesday. So, and I'm still a little bit more optimistic to able to actually see that film for the first time. Although the reason why I somehow skipped that film on the theaters, just because I've noticed about the fact that there's going to be a lot of mixed reaction for that particular film in mind, and especially noticeable, it doesn't help about the fact that the actual review scores of Wish is pretty much all over the place when it comes to not only critics but also with fans as well. So I'm still a little bit more optimistic to able to actually check that film out. Well, I can assure you about the fact that my expectations might be a little bit lower as far as I'm aware of at this point. So, but anyway though, so it looks like we've almost nearly done with this stage. So I could assure you about the fact that we've now going to be able to actually entering into the final segment of the stage, and that's something tells me we're going to be traversing into a different set of rooms, ranging from something to do with the fact that we have to able to deal with the forms of fusioning certain enemies or anything else like that. So either way, let's just go through here, and yeah, we somehow come towards the actual turntable thing right here, so we can able to go through room to room. So yeah, we got able to figure something out. So anyway, so yeah, like I said before, my expectations of Wish is going to be quite low, especially noticeable concerning for the fact that it does have some bit of promises, but that again though is just about the fact that the actual reception to the film is just all over the place, you know. So, and speaking of which though, of something relates to all over the place, I have no idea that this particular upcoming movie is also going to be releasing in 2025, and apparently though, we're about to be getting a crossover kind of movie, and as a result, it's going to be called Pooh Universe, the Monsters Assemble. And I was like, oh my god, you kidding, right? Especially noticeable because I was assuming that Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2 is going to be bad enough, but apparently the actual crossover is going to exist. So as a result, yeah, as I said before, the film is going to be called Pooh Universe, Monsters Assemble, and it's just ridiculous. Especially noticeable, it did say the description for it, and also as a result, they did show us a poster for it, and it's basically a knockoff of Avengers Assemble poster, because the reason why I say this is because, well, the font might look a bit similar, except the fact that obviously, no matter what though, it's based off from the horror genre, based off from classic Disney movies, ranging from, let's just say one of them in Peter Pan, and one of them from Bambi, Pinocchio, the majority of the Winnie the Pooh characters, and Alice in Wonderland, and even Sleeping Beauty as well. So no matter what though, they're bringing ourselves the majority of the characters based off from, well, like I said before, for those certain films as I mentioned earlier. So for instance, about the fact that they'll do bring Tinkerbell and Bambi, Pinocchio, Peter Pan, and also Tigger, Piglet, and I think also Winnie the Pooh as well. The Mad Hatter, and finally Sleeping Beauty, and oh my god, this is just so ridiculously over the top at this point, especially noticeable. I have no words to say, and especially noticeable because it's a good thing I did somehow skip those movies after all, just because I get the horrible feeling about the fact that it'll continue that tradition for the majority of the films of later, like, years to come, or anything else like that. I mean, seriously, I just got nothing else to say. I mean, oh my god, what were they thinking? So, anyway, okay, so this is what we're supposed to do. So, basically, it's how to place the bomb, like, enemy right here, and then we have to do this, and then we have to backtrack for a bit, so we can able to, fuse that, next enemy, which appears to be this little zappy, like, enemy, so we can able to do just that. And we can able to backtrack for a bit, so just to ensure we can able to get rid of this, blue crystal, so that way we can able to actually continue our progressioning, or should I say, that we can able to finish the level like so, because as soon as we go for these little doors here, obviously the level ends, just because no matter what though, the cutscene triggers, and something tells me it's about the fact that we might able to see what, Lolo is going to interact with that particular strange mirror. So, yeah. And I suppose the final thing I want to mention about is that it may look like that the animated Cat in the Hat movie will be releasing at some point also in 2026, along the same lines as the films of not only the upcoming next Mario movie, and on top of that with Toy Story 5, like I mentioned this earlier, and finally Frozen 3. So yeah, that seems kind of strange, doesn't it? When it comes to likely for the majority of any other movies will be releasing during that specific period. So yeah, and as far as I'm aware, that's as far as I can able to explain any of those things, I'm afraid. I mean, sure, I would have liked able to explain something new at this point, but honestly folks, that's just how I can usually explain any of these things for right now. So, although I do know for the fact that recently I somehow unfortunately going back onto Mario Kart Tour again, if only because I did somehow manage to able to realize I'm gonna have to start unlocking some more drivers at this point. And I think, if I recall correctly, that I'm almost catching up for able to actually just trying to able to get myself a grand total of 200 drivers at this point, which I think is actually pretty swell to me though. Although I would have able to actually appreciate and trying to able to go ahead and well, just trying to able to get some more carts or gliders, but honestly, they're just for the sake of the forms of bragging rights, I guess, or just probably just something else entirely. So, and as it turns out, it's about the fact that, well, Lolo is trying to able to be the most superior apprentice as far as I'm concerned with this point. Although, mind you, I haven't exactly paid attention to the forms of the actual in-game dialogue right there, just because, well, I was being busy just trying to able to discuss upon new stuff as far as I'm aware, and it looks like the mirror has been shattered to pieces. So, yeah, that seems kind of you know what I'm talking about. So, either way, yeah, that again, folks, I think that's as far as I can try to able to discuss on that specific topic. Although, there is technically one last thing I want to mention about, is that Sonic did somehow tell me something back in during the film's vid yesterday, that it's been 15 years ago since when this particular film called Hotel for Dogs did somehow came out since in 2009. And geez, it's been 15 years ago since that film came out. Although Sonic did somehow tell me something, he did went to see it on a big screen, alongside with Knuckles during that one time. And he did have a pretty enjoyable time, but it's kind of hard for me to able to go back into that film, unfortunately. Just because no matter what though, when it comes to any other films I somehow managed to enjoy recently, I somehow feel like about the fact that it's actually kind of hard to able to go back into that film recently for Hotel for Dogs. Although, yeah, you know what I'm saying. Which, as a result, no matter what though, is about the fact that, well, there's going to be a lot of stuff there's going to be 15 this year, for not only for film releases, but also with gaming releases during that specific period as well. So, and yeah, that's what I could really talk about it. Although, we would have liked able to tackle for the next boss, as you can tell, but I'm afraid, due to the forms of time constraints, I think suffice to say we'll save that boss fight for next time. So speaking of which, is that we got the endings of this point right here, so join me next time for more of Let's Play of Klonoa Phantasy Reverie series, while we're still playing through Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil, and that's what appears to be about the fact that we're going to be taking on the next boss somewhere in the forms of Indecision Pass, so I'm sure it'll be pretty thrilling. So I'll see you guys until our next Tuesday. Later, fellas.